Welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We're your co-hosts. That's RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you just shortly after Georgia Tech 16-9 loss to Georgia. I'm sitting here like quite literally outside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. RJ is back at home or back at school. RJ, how you doing, man?
Doing as good as I can. Not as thrilling of a game to cover as last year, but we still gotta recap for you.
Yeah, for sure. This was of all the outcomes of this game and how it was played out. This was like the least expected one to me. Obviously I picked Georgia to win by quite a lot. I thought it was either going to be Georgia winning by a lot or Georgia winning a shootout. I didn't really because I just we'll get into all the stuff. But obviously this was a heck of a performance by the Georgia Tech defense just to start things off. Like it really was. I mean, they held Georgia to under 300 yards. Gunnar Stockton finished with 70 yards passing and an interception. I mean, he was off kilter pretty much all game, and that was with a couple of injuries or one key injury, early in the game. But we'll kind of dig into all that the way we usually do. Before we get into it, I say this. I've had to say this more times than I've wanted to lately, but I know it sucks when your team loses. Not wanting to check things out, but for those that do, we really appreciate the support, continued listening, all that kind of stuff. Would love it if you'd subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already. We got an important off season coming up. I know maybe a 1% chance there in Charlotte next week. We'll talk about that at the end. But yeah, follow us wherever you get your podcast, all that kind of stuff we talk about each week. But I guess let's get into it. So look, we both thought Georgia Tech was up against it heading into this game. Defense had not been playing well at all. Pitt kind of really put the blueprint that we knew could be there for teams to follow to stop Georgia Tech's offense. And look, first drive of the game, that first drive of the game, it did not start well for Georgia. Uh, they had a mishap on the kickoff. There were so many other things that happened. We didn't really get a chance to ask Key about it after the game, but they had to start at their own 3 yard line. Um, First carry to Jamal, almost like it was going to be a safety, but forward progress was called. Haynes then threw an incomplete pass. I didn't think it was grounding, but there were a lot of people that did. Then you did have a really nice 30-yard catch or so from Brett Seither. Right up the seam. I mean, it was a good job by Haynes. He was schemed open. Good job. Unfortunately, drive stalled out. Christian Miller got a sack. That was to me early in the game. Like it was very reminiscent of the Pitt game in that they were just getting a lot of outside pressure. Like they found like they were beating blocks, and Georgia Tech was just not playing it very well. But it was apparent early on like they were getting pressure on King, and it was affecting him quite a bit. Have to punt it away. Georgia gets the ball. Braden Manley gets another big sack. That's second straight week where he got one. And then Tajay Butler got an interception off a terrible throw by Gunnar Stockton. Threw it a little bit behind. Georgia Tech gets short field. Um, Goes 7 plays, 24 yards, took 4:27 off the clock. They did have an illegal formation penalty. I think it was on second down, backed them up a little bit. Had to settle for a field goal, and that's something we're going to be talking about kind of as this goes on, and it's something we've been talking about for weeks now. It's Georgia Tech's offense gets down in the red zone, and they just haven't been able to finish drives. When you get that short of a field against the number 4 team in the country, you got to cash in.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that with Haynes King, and the offense in general just over the past couple of weeks. Just couldn't get it done. That third down play. Obviously, the pass to Canyon didn't really go anywhere, and then you have 4th and 7. I mean, there's again nothing wrong with the decision that Key made. You take your field goal 10 times out of 10 on 4th and 7. There, it's just you needed a touchdown. It's just an unfortunate play.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was. I'm not saying it was a bad call by Kieran. I just when you have a chance to go up 7-0 and really have all the momentum, like you have to take advantage of it. And
Yeah.
they didn't. It allowed. It was the only lead of the game for Georgia Tech. It was 3-0. So Georgia gets the ball back, and look, this game was kind of flying by, especially like it was kind of a quick game. I mean, Georgia got the ball back. They went into the second quarter, had a good drive, 13 plays, 71 yards, took 6:38 off the clock. So on this drive, Zach Toby, the cornerback, Clayton Powley, the safety, got injured. Toby was able to come back in, but Clayton Powley went out, and freshman Phoenix Felton came in. He has been kind of coming on here these past few weeks. And just one of my overall takeaways was as bad as it has been for the past 3 games. I mean, both all like C.J. Bailey at NC State, Dylan Lonergan at Boston College, and Mason Heinchel last week, outside maybe the second half, carved up Georgia Tech secondary. I thought the coverage was really good all night long for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and it just really felt like they were playing motivated ball. Like, especially that linebacking group that, we've seen get picked on a couple of times throughout the year. Like, EJ Lightsey was, on his stuff the entire game, that entire linebacking crew, the secondary, which was, as dwindled down as you can get, as many injuries as you can have to a secondary, which, crazy we're having that conversation 2 years in a row. Felton played really well. It was just, they really were playing motivated ball. That defense was great.
Yeah, and a lot of credit should go to Lightsey. He's struggled
Yeah.
past few weeks, especially in run defense. And that was kind of the theme, Georgia goes, ties it up 3-3. And that 13 play drive, like they were getting what they wanted to on the ground. And I was starting to worry, like, yeah, the game was tied, but I was like, man, if this is the Georgia Tech defense is going to be here the rest of the game, and Georgia was really leaning on them, I was starting to worry about it getting away from Georgia Tech, especially because they couldn't figure out anything on offense. I mean, their very next drive, they go 3-and-out. Marshall Nichols has an awful punt that gave Georgia really good field position. So Georgia goes 9 plays, 55 yards, 3:50 off the clock. We're running the ball really well again. Zachariah Branch had a nice 24-yard catch on third down. He ended up catching the touchdown, and so it's 10-3. Georgia Tech goes 3-and-out very next drive. Georgia gets the ball back, 9 plays, 55 yards, 3:14 off the clock. Ends up hitting a field goal. I mean, they scored on their last 3 possessions of the first half after that interception. And that's the way it was. It was 13-3. And again, this game was just, again, flying by. Total yardage was just big time in favor of Georgia, 181-79. 145 of those yards were on the ground on 27 carries. They were averaging 5.4 yards per carry. Georgia Tech only had 23 rushing yards on 10 carries. Haynes King, 7 of 11, 55 yards. Gunnar Stockton, 4 of 10, 36 yards. Touchdown, interception. To me, what stood out in the first half was just Georgia being able to effectively run the ball, Georgia Tech's offense being able to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and it really felt like the difference was, Georgia's athletes just kind of took over the first half. Like Zachariah Branch, everybody in that Georgia offense, just runs and catches the ball like they were shot out of a cannon. That big screen play for Zachariah Branch, then the touchdown, then that big double move, and the Georgia offensive linemen getting to the next level really quick. It just kind of felt like, they were putting their stamp on the game, but it was still very close heading into halftime. Georgia Tech obviously still in the game.
Yeah, and look, Georgia was getting the ball first after the half, and it was like they could have put the game away like right then and there on that first drive, because it was pretty apparent Georgia Tech's offense just was not going to be able to overcome a big deficit. The defense was going to have to play even better than it did and it wasn't great in the first half because, like I said, the run defense was very suspect. Like Georgia was leaning on them a little bit. Nate Frazier had a really nice first half. But the secondary and the coverage I thought it was excellent all game long. Stockton had to hold the ball several times. Georgia Tech ended up getting 2 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. They had more sacks than Georgia, and they had the same amount of tackles for loss, which, again, it's hard to believe. So, again, Georgia gets the ball. It's 13-3 coming out of the half. Excuse me. They go 3-and-out. Like, it was exactly what you needed to do. Georgia Tech gets the ball, and they had some momentum early in the drive. You had a nice catch from Eric Rivers for a first down. Bailey Stockton catches a third down conversion. They get into Georgia territory, or we're about near midfield. Haynes King takes a deep shot to Dean Patterson, and it was a heck of a play by Ellis Robinson, who is really talented defensive back for Georgia. Ended up as an interception. I Look, hindsight is 2020. Like I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, you definitely shouldn't have called the interception play. I kind of didn't like. It was a bad throw, to be perfectly honest. When I've gone back and watched a few times, like it was just Patterson to me never really had a chance to go up and get the ball. It was just it was a bit of a demoralizing play that you just couldn't have. Put the defense in a bad spot when you had some momentum going.
Yeah, and it just you know it kind of came at a really bad spot. I think it was more of a desperation throw than anything, but a desperation throw to a guy at cornerback who was consensus 5-star number one cornerback out of high school. Um, 9 times out of 10, that one-on-one is not going to work out very well for you.
No, it's not. So Georgia, of course, gets the ball back. Georgia Tech forces a punt. Like they did a good job of getting the ball back to their offense. Um, Georgia Tech gets in some decent field position. They go 6 plays, 27 yards. Took about 3 minutes off the clock. Aiden Burr hits his second field goal of the day, 44 yards, cuts it to 13-6. So we get into the fourth quarter. Georgia has the ball in their own territory. Tech's defense again. So let me go. Let me third quarter. Just to kind of give you an idea. So there was only like Tech only had 58 total yards in the third quarter, but Georgia had 36. Like it wasn't like they ran five more plays than Tech, and Georgia only had 2.1 yards per play. Like that Georgia Tech's defense did a really good job in the third quarter holding down Georgia. They would outgain them again in the fourth. Like I'll kind of get into some of the second half stats and whatnot, but Cash Jones gets a fourth down conversion. It was really close. It was really hard to tell from the vantage point I had. I'll have to go back and see the tape again to. Uh, it was a close call. When they called it on the field, I was kind of like, with how close that is, they're just going to go with the call on the field, and that's what they did. Georgia kept the ball. Um, Stockton did try to take another deep shot. Rodney Shelley had a chance to get an interception. He dropped it. They forced Georgia into a really long field goal. They hit it 16-6. And Georgia Tech's back was really up against the wall. Like you needed two scores, and the defense needed to play well. Um, at, did you get a better vantage point than I did on the Cash Jones play?
It looked like he got there. I mean, they
Okay.
said in the broadcast they went through the replay like it was pretty unanimous as soon as they went to the booth.
Again, it was really close. Like I don't think like it was a bad call either way. Like I think it could have gone either way. So Georgia Tech gets it back. And this was just one of the Malik gets a first down catch. Isaiah Canyon gets an 18-yard catch. They're driving, and then Keelan Rutledge gets a personal foul. It went from I think what was it, second, third and short, and then you're looking at like a 3rd and 17, and call didn't go anywhere. They ended up having to punt, and that was just one of the critical plays just of the entire game. It was just unfortunate. They have to give the ball back to Georgia. Um, Zachariah Branch gets a big third down catch on the next drive. Jordan Boyd, whose name we haven't really said a lot this year, he ends up getting a sack, big time play, gets the ball back for Georgia Tech. They go 7 plays, 64 yards. Only took 2.5 minutes off the clock. Aiden Burr hits a 41-yard field goal. It's 16-9 with 3:30 left. Like as ugly as the game was, like Georgia Tech, much like last week, they what was it, about 450 left. They were down 35-28 against Pitt. They had a chance. All you got to do is get a stop. Um, they just didn't do it in enough time. Like Georgia gets an early 3rd-and-1 conversion. They did end up stopping them, but there ended up being about 20 seconds on the clock, if even that. Isaiah Canyon makes a really nice catch to get him about midfield. Like they had a chance, like a legitimate Hail Mary. Like it wasn't like you were backed all the way up. Like they Jamal caught a ball. Isaiah Canyon made a nice catch. And then the Hail Mary attempt was incomplete, and that was that. Again, to me, the biggest differences in the game were not converting in the red zone when you had opportunities to, especially a couple times when you had short field or had those kind of advantages. Um, we said it before the show. Like, if you told me that Georgia would only have 260 yards, um, and average 3.9 yards per play, like Tech's offense was putrid today, and they averaged 5 yards per play, which Georgia only had 3.9, and they ran I think 17 more plays than Georgia Tech did. If you'd have told me that and that Georgia Tech would have 2 sacks and 7 tackles for loss, I thought the winning streak for Georgia was over in this rivalry. I really would have.
Yeah, and one of the craziest stats for me to look back on in this game, obviously we talk about Gunnar Stockton. Um, Georgia had 70 passing yards total net in the game. 53 of those were after the catch.
Yep.
I mean, the secondary was absolutely awesome in this game. Probably the best game from this secondary
Oh,
the
without a
entire
doubt.
year. Like some of the best coverage I've seen this year. A lot of pressure was on Stockton the entire game. Best linebacker play. Um, but it really just was the sputtering out in the red zone or sputtering out on the 30-yard line just shy of the red zone. Um, that big personal foul penalty on Keelan Rutledge, just all of the things. You don't get enough points. You were never going to be able to score 9 points and beat Georgia, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, and on the opposite end of what we just said, like if you'd have told me Georgia Tech scores 9 points in this game, I thought this would have been a 3-minute podcast, and I wouldn't have wanted to show my face here tonight. Like that's how bad I thought what it would have been. Um, it just look, it's third straight one score loss to Georgia. They had a chance to win this game. They had a chance last year to win this game. They got back into that game in 2023 and had some chances late and didn't do it. Like it's clear that Key gets them ready to play this game each and every year. And I'll just borrow from him. He was asked after the game, like, "What's it going to take to get over this hump and finally beat Georgia?" And he basically said recruiting. Like he was very short with these. Like, in a sense, it's just get better players. And we're going to kind of do a season review, and I know the season's not over yet. Like I'm more saying just kind of a roster review and kind of just looking how some things went. We're going to kind of get into that next week, but and he's absolutely right. Like the past 3 years, it's and it's especially the last two. You can point to a play here or there where if you make the play, the game's different, and it's when you look, nobody questions whether Georgia is more talented on paper. Like it's they're more talented by a lot. Like they recruit as well as anybody. They develop really well. Like the only team on paper that's probably more talented than them is Ohio State. And so when you are at a talent disadvantage like that, you know you have to have excellent coaching, which I think they've had for the majority part of the past 3 years. I know, Blake Gideon's not been perfect this year, but man, he threw his fastball today and it worked. But you there, it's going to come down to some certain plays, and you have to make them. And they didn't today. They didn't last year, and they just haven't. And I'm rambling a little bit here, but that's just it comes down. It came down to some plays you had to score in the red zone, weren't able to do it. The interception was super costly, and it's 8 straight for Georgia. Nobody's happy about it, but it is what it is. They've gotten close, but coming up short. Finished the regular season 9-3. Any other thoughts? Or I guess let me just say this real quick. Like, so just second half, Georgia Tech outgained Georgia 172-79. Georgia averaged 2.6 yards per play. Georgia Tech 5.9. And look, 5.9 yards per play is not very good. Like, you want to be around 7. Like, that's kind of the elite category you want to be in. And they have been for most of this year. Um, and for how they played today.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier when you talk about the difference between, a 2025 Georgia Tech team and a 2025 Georgia team, you know, there's excellent coaching on both sides. I think Georgia Tech has one of the best coaching staffs in the country, some of the best coordinators, some of the best position coaches. Um, and that's why the difference comes down to talent, because Georgia also has the best coaching, excellent coaching, some of the best coordinators in the country, the best position coaches in the country, and that's what it comes down to. There's no level of um, preparedness, even though I think Brent Key does try as hard as he can, and you can see in these games that you know again, I feel like we always say this, but one play could go a different way, or one drive could go a different way, and we're talking about this game in a totally different way. Like, this is never not going to be a competitive game. Um, it's just unfortunate when you're going against a team that probably has uh, some of the most, or some of the highest level resources in the country. But I think Georgia Tech is getting there, and I think Brent Key is doing all of what he can in his power to stop the Georgia win streak in this rivalry.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's I do think to sit back for a second and to see how far it's come just in the last 5 years from this being just an annual beatdown to you know you're arguing hey, a play here or there and maybe we win this game. Now I don't think it was like there were a few more plays to be made than say last year, um, but at the same time you want to start winning these games. Like that's Key talks about making the jump and being a higher level program, and like that's when it starts. Like you got to be able to win this game. But like I want to give a lot of flowers to the defense for playing the way they did. Like I do want to end a bit on a positive note, as much positive as I can be. The defense deserves a lot of credit. Like they've looked horrible for the past month, and it cost them in games against NC State and Pitt. Almost cost them against Boston College. Um, but they played their tails off today. They really did. But this was the third time was the charm for Kirby and Glenn Schumann against Buster Faulkner. Georgia Tech offensively had been really really good. They had over 500 yards last year. They had 200 something yards rushing against Georgia 2 years ago. But Kirby and Glenn Schumann, like they brought it today, and Georgia was excellent on defense. Like they held down one of the most explosive offenses in the country to not scoring a touchdown. Um, and that was I know the first half it was the fewest total yards they've had in a half since 2023. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's an unfortunate result, but I think uh, a lot of the players, you know, left their all on the field, and I think a lot of their players, for Georgia Tech, had their best game of the season. Um, Brett Seither making two huge catches on third down, both of them, deep in Georgia Tech's own territory. Two big catches, 20, 30-yard catches. Jordan Boyd, obviously the big sack. It just felt like, Georgia Tech was really playing motivated football in this game. And now they got something to take into, whether it's, you know, Charlotte, however rare that outcome may be, it's still possible. Whatever bowl game they get, however the season may end. But, I think a lot of these guys did do everything in their power, especially Haynes King as well. I mean, I think that goes without saying. I think we take advantage, of the fact that you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and you know, he leaves his all on every field there is. Whether he was limping on the first drive of the game, and he still played out the rest of the game.
yeah, I mean it is what it is. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Any other thoughts on this game before we kind of wrap up that part of it?
I think that's all I got.
Okay, so before we get out of here, I do want to talk about some of the ACC champions championship scenarios. Just run through them real quick because, yeah, we talked about it a little on the preview the other day. Like there is still a very small chance that Georgia Tech is able to get into the ACC championship game. Just kind of run through them real quick. Look, first scenario: Pitt beats Miami, Virginia Tech beats Virginia, Cal beats SMU. Then Georgia Tech is playing Pitt ACC championship game. If Miami beats Pitt, Cal beats SMU, Wake Forest beats Duke, Virginia Tech beats Virginia, and NC State beats North Carolina. Tech is in. You lost, Duke lost, Virginia lost, North Carolina, NC State, Boston College went over Syracuse, and if they finish higher than Miami and SMU in the Sports Source Analytic ranking, they're in. And another one, if Miami win, SMU loss, Duke loss, Virginia win, NC State win, Boston College win, and finishing higher than Miami, SMU in the Sports Source Analytic rankings, then they would be in. Again, it's a very long shot. It's probably not going to happen, but it could. We'll see what happens. I'll keep everybody updated tomorrow. Again, Georgia Tech and Miami, or not Georgia Tech, no, Miami and Pitt play at noon tomorrow. Wake Forest, Duke, I believe, play at 3:30. Virginia Tech play at 7. SMU and Cal play at 8. I think NC State and North Carolina play at 7:30. And Boston College and Syracuse play at 3. I think because that's a CW game. So, any thoughts on that?
I, you know, I just think as a fan, we talked about this, in the preview podcast and, a couple of times since, um, Georgia Tech has gotten into this scenario. I think as a fan, you got to root for the cleanest way to get there. Because when you start talking about having 7, 8 results go your way, plus being higher than Miami in the Sports Source analytics, I think you're asking for a lot. I think, the one situation that's, the easiest is, having the Pitt win, having UVA lose to Virginia Tech, and then having SMU lose to Cal next week. I think that's, simplest, cleanest way. Obviously, if you had beaten Pitt, you wouldn't be in this scenario. But again, still a very weird back way for Georgia Tech to find their way into Charlotte.
Yep. They're not completely dead. They are just mostly dead heading into Saturday. Um, yeah, tough one. 9-3 finish to the regular season. If they don't go to Charlotte, obviously, they we'll wait and see what bowl game they go to. I know there's kind of a wide range of outcomes there. We'll kind of talk about that more next week, depending on what happens tomorrow. RJ, any other thoughts on this game or any other thoughts in general before we get out of here?
Not that I got right now.
Well, hat tip to Georgia. Their defense is very very good. They played elite today. Kept Georgia Tech out of the end zone. Um, just got to give them their flowers. It's 8 straight now. We'll head into next season. They'll hope to break the streak then, and we will be back. If Georgia Tech by some miracle gets into the ACC championship game Saturday night, you will see our two ugly faces on Saturday. Or I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for RJ. If not, we'll be back next week. We got signing day coming up. We've got just a lot of things to get into. Um, there is no off season here for Believe in Georgia Tech. So again, I know it's especially tough when your team loses. It's very tough when they lose to a hated rival. But appreciate anybody that is tuning in. Don't take any of it for granted. Really appreciate you guys. Again, let us know any thoughts you have below on anything. I was hoping that they'd find a way to win tonight, and the comment section would be filled with people calling me an idiot for picking the score that I did. I was really hoping for that, but it didn't happen. So we'll be back. Appreciate anybody for tuning in, and catch you next time.